So for those catching up on YouTube, welcome. This is the Youth Participation Practice Network, meeting in May 2026. And we're lucky enough to have Simon Green, the Programs Manager from the Youth Disability Advocacy Service. He's going to talk to us about how to plan and respond to access requirements from young people with disabilities that might be accessing your programs. So I'll throw over to you, Simo. Let me know if you need anything. Otherwise, I'll let you share your screen and drive the ship from here.
All right, thanks, Sam. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, YPPN, for hosting us today. It's nice to be here. Yes, that is fine for me to record. No problems at all for the recording that I gave my own consent. We're here today. I want to talk about a very simple topic. So I'm from Youth Disability Advocacy Service, and our whole deal is to support disabled young people's rights. But I want to talk about a simple topic that I've realized over time is one of the biggest barriers to being able to support young people's rights. It opens the door. To be able to ask about access in the first place is the thing that opens the door to so much more access and inclusion. And I realized that when we don't ask about access, we're not talking about disability, which is a natural flow on. And that's such a big barrier because it just then stops anything else from really happening. You don't even know they're disabled. You don't even know they have an access need. Because we also know that it makes people nervous. We know it can make you as a worker very nervous to ask about disability. You may have fear, you may feel worried about it. You may have very genuine, very kind things in mind too, like that you've accidentally embarrassed someone, that you've got it wrong, you've said the wrong thing, that you're humiliating people. And those are very human, very empathetic responses. They're lovely. They're the reasons you got into this sort of work. But we also know from our research that too many of us freeze up and then we don't do anything. We don't ask about it. We don't take the next step. So I realized if I could do anything, it would be to encourage you all to feel comfortable, to be able to ask about access needs. So that's what I will try and do with you today. First, I'd like to acknowledge country. I'd like to acknowledge the custodians of the land we gather on today and pay our respects to their elders past and present. I'm on Wurundjeri country today. And I want to acknowledge that young people are the future generation of elders and leaders, and that the land were almost stolen and sovereignty was never ceded. I've got an Aboriginal and a Torres Strait Islander flag on the screen, and I also have a beautiful image of Bunjil. Bunjil is the creator spirit, the wedge-tailed eagle, and his law states that those who walk on this land must care for the country and the waterways, as well as care for the children and young people. So that's very relevant to our work. So first of all, I just thought I'd show you a list of common access needs. These access needs are available on our website. We share the ones these are the ones we use day to day, and we share them on our Together Access and Inclusion resource online. Beck, if you don't mind sharing a link to that, you'll all be able to get a copy of that, and it's free, it's available. You can find this and many other useful resources. But I thought I'd take you through them very simply. We tell people that these are accessibility needs because some people don't even know what those are yet, especially younger people as they're learning about their disabilities. And we say, let us know if these apply to you or if you have an access need that isn't listed. I need access for a mobility device like a wheelchair or walker. I need large format print or large fonts. I'll be using a screen reader or screen magnifier. I'll need low lighting. I need bright lighting. I need to avoid strobing or flashing lights. I'll be using an Auslan interpreter, a hearing aid, bringing a service animal, attending these workshops with a support worker, hands-on activities. I'll need support with hands-on activities. I'll be using a communication device. I'll need support communicating, information about the event sent before I arrive. I need automatic captions, live or more accurate captions, fragrance or perfume-free space, need to take breaks. My accessibility needs aren't listed. Now, we at YDAS will make that you have to choose an answer so that we make sure we're getting access needs. But they might say, we might also add to that, I do not have any access needs or I don't want to say, so that they've got a chance to opt out. But I think note it more importantly that each option here is framed from the perspective of the young person. I need, I will. This helps them identify their needs. They're also framed as actual needs or uses. It's not their disability and it's not their impairment. So for example, we don't say I am deaf We say, I will be using an interpreter, an Auslan interpreter. For options like information about the event sent before I arrive, that's one of the needs, we're covering a huge spectrum of impairments and disabilities. This also, as a list, encompasses both online and in person, but we cut this down to suit. If it's just online, we might get rid of some of the ones that are more about an in-person experience, like attending with a service animal. You could just cover what's relevant. We also might say that lighting options aren't relevant all online because people can control their own environments. One thing we often hear, though, with this list is that it helps young people realize what's available, what organizations can even do, and that they may actually even have access needs. It helps them realize that I have an access need because I've never seen this list before. It's more comprehensive. Oh, I do need that. Wow, I had no idea. That's also compared to just like a very short list or just write them down in an open text box, which is often a way to provide flexibility, but for people who don't know their access needs, they might just leave it blank. We also hear that young people say, after they experience an access need, so especially captions, we've had young people who have said they don't have any access needs, gone into a workshop, seen live captions or captions on the Zoom, and they've realized how helpful they were. And they've started asking for them more later. They've realized they have an access need. And it kind of boils down, this list is so comprehensive because people don't know what they don't know. But then I think the next thing for you all, you might be curious as workers, what do I do with these? I've got all these lists. You can map each access need to an action, and then you can set all those actions up in advance. And this is how we plan our events. We have all these access needs provided as an option, and then we already have pre-written plans. We've designed our workshops or our sessions to already do these things, or at least be aware of them in advance. So I'll take you through some of them. Someone needs someone needs a mobility device like a wheelchair or a walker. We might ensure there's enough room for those devices to move around tables and chairs. We figure out how wide the widest is, and then we use space in between. If they need large format print or large fonts, we will print large format content or make the slide font bigger, the font in the slide. If they need low or they need bright lighting, we might book a venue with dimmable lights and bring table lamps. If they need to avoid strobing or flashing lights, we might remove transitions and GIFs from PowerPoint presentations. And sometimes we might send a video link to the group to watch videos on their own screens, or rather than share the video, which might trigger someone with the strobing lights. So they have options. For an Auslan interpreter, we'll book an interpreter a good month out. And we just cancel them 4 business days beforehand if no one says they need them on the list. We also close our sign-up form 5 days before the event, so we have time to respond to any access needs, and in this case, to cancel an Auslan interpreter. A quick note too, closing a form 1 week before the event is a great practice just in general for lots of reasons. There are other disability orgs that do this too. One of the reasons is if you get an access need that you didn't expect, you've actually got some time to try and provide it rather than closing the form the day before the event, discovering someone's got a request that you just couldn't possibly meet. It also gives you buffer to check in on participants, familiarize yourself with them more broadly. It's just generally good as well to have a buffer for preparing workshops or events. Actually, I was going to jump ahead. Attending a workshop with a support worker, so something we do, we need to be considering, we need to make sure we have the name of that person, they're working with children's check, and a police check of that support worker to make sure that they're an appropriate person to be in the room. We also might give them a chair if they're coming to an event, make sure there's a chair for the support person. If they need hands-on support with activities, we might have a staff member in person to support them. Or we might have instructions or alternative methods of taking part in the activity equitably. If they're using a communication device or they need support communicating, that one's a little bit vague. We might reach out to the participant and we'll get more information. Then we'll make sure we've incorporated that into our directions and into our activities and directions to ourselves. For example, we might give them questions or activities in advance so they can pre-type them into their device, pre-type their answers into their device. Or we might say, do you want more time to answer? Do you want to be at the end of our communications order so you've got time to answer? And on that point, just so you all know, you can totally contact people to ask them about the best ways to support their access needs. You can also show them your plans. You might have some plans you've got in mind to support them and ask for feedback or adjustments. You might say, oh, I'll call them up or contact them and say, we can send you the questions beforehand, so you've got time to write your answers. Or we could ask you to contribute last on the speaking order. Would either of those work for you? Do you have another preference? We might also call them up and say, when it comes to needing breaks, we plan to have 5-minute breaks every half hour, and then we'll do a big 20-minute break in the middle. Is that enough? Is that enough time for you for a break? Would you like more? I think the key thing when you're talking to someone about their access needs is you just keep it focused on support, and in some ways about problem solving, because if the solution you've got doesn't quite work, they'll have ideas as well. They've been disabled a long time. They'll have some ideas about what works for them. And you don't need to feel nervous, because almost always people appreciate it when you reach out and say, oh, I just wanted to get more clarity, because they know you're thinking about them. You're actually going to give them those support needs. Coming back to the list, information about the event before they arrive, we send the agenda, we send the slides, we send the workbook out a good week or maybe a day before the event, depending. With automatic captions, we have Zoom captions now. We used to have to turn them on and make a whole big deal of them, but now they just come built into Zoom. But we'll explain how to turn them on. People might not know. And with live captions or more accurate captions, we do it the same way as Auslan. We'll book live captions, which is a person typing them live, and we cancel them if they're not required. So that's a list. That's a nice, clear list. You can pre-plan that. But what about asking questions? What about calling them on the phone? What about they come to your service just randomly off the street if you've got an open service? You can freeze up a little bit there. A form helps you because you know who's attending. It's a little bit more structured. Our Together training, which again, the link is in the chat, our Together training and our online resource, they cover how to ask disabled young people questions in more detail. We also talk about the power of assumptions in our training. We all make assumptions all the time. It's just something that we do. That's not a problem, but we can make the wrong assumptions sometimes. And it is questions that help us check against any wrong or accidentally harmful assumptions that we make. Questions are how we counter our fears of embarrassing others, so long as we ask them in a respectful way. And so a way to consider that is, what is in a question? When you're asking a question, just consider things like what are you really trying to learn and why? So for example, you're trying to learn how someone can take part in a workshop equitably. How important is the question? So think about your responsibility versus your curiosity. You might be curious to know why they need some sort of access need, but it's not really your responsibility. You don't really need to know that answer. You just need to provide them with an equitable experience. How much do you really need to know? If they say, yes, that's fine, do you really need to ask anything else after that? If you do have things you need to know, are you going to express those? Like, I need to know who your support worker is so that I can get there working with children's checks, because we need to keep everyone safe. What is the context that you're asking about this person's accessibility needs? What's the relationship with the person? What else might have been happening that day? We know that, someone might have to deal with their access needs and not having them met quite frequently throughout a day. You might want to ask them, how are you today? How's it been going? Just to get context. They might then not want to talk about it as much, so you could pick another time. How do you give them power in their response? So one of the most important things is, will their answer change things? And what we're trying to get ahead of here is, we give such detail in our access list and we give a week to respond, because you don't want to give people the false sense that you will actually provide for them. That just breaks trust. It breaks it down. And we saw it with an old Progress festival. There's a Progress event that's held every year. And they did quite a bad job with a lot of the access needs, and they got absolutely roasted online, and it was a really negative experience for them. But then they learned from that and they built on it and they responded. So you want to make sure you give young people power in their response. If they say, this will help me, you want to try and respond positively, but also, you can tell them, okay, well, there's certain things we need to adjust at our workplace as well. How do you preface the question? And do you offer an out to them answering? So like I mentioned on the form, we can say, I don't want to talk about this. And that's fine as well. It just might mean that, you have to adjust your approach. Just basic things to keep in mind before I wrap up. You want to listen and you want to learn from them, particularly if you're not sure about access needs. You can ask the question, hear from it, and then say that you're still learning. You don't need to have a solution. You can just ask them what could be possible. You can go look it up. You can go research. You don't have to have solutions. Instead, you can trust them, young disabled people, to be experts in their experiences. They tend to know what they need. Those needs might change. They might one day need a seat. They might the next day not. That's fine. That's up to them. It is important to maintain trust by following through on what you discuss with them. And all disabled people are on their own journeys. Like I said earlier, they might not even use the term disability. They might not use the term access needs. That's fine. We're all on very different journeys with disability. So I didn't want to talk too much. I wanted to now open it up to you to have some chats. I'd love if you could share any questions or situations you would like to unpack together. I can offer advice. I can ask you all to help. Some of you might have some good experiences, but I am conscious that it can be a bit nervous asking that question. It can make you vulnerable. So you can private message me if that would be helpful. And I don't have to say your name. I'll just say, I've got a great question here. Here's what the question is. It's okay to be open about times we've needed help and to learn. We've all been in this space. When I first started at YDAS, I had no idea about disability and access. I had to learn a lot myself. So the question really is, what makes you hesitate, freeze, worry, give pause about asking disabled people about their access needs? What have I missed? I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you so much, Simon. I love how methodical it is, like going through all of those questions and being really clear about how we can frame it in a way that feels empowering for young people, and then thinking about how we respond to that and what we do as a result, which is often a bit of a missing link. Like I think Yakvik have done quite well at getting better about asking questions, but I'm not sure we've thought nearly clearly enough about those processes of responding to those needs. So it's been a real reminder for me to think about how we do that in our work. One question I had for you was just around conflicting access needs. Is that something that you've kind of managed, and how might that work? I was thinking sort of specifically in the list around the lighting seemed like an obvious one to use, but there might be others that you can think of that are more kind of relevant. Have you got any examples of unpacking that as a challenge?
Yeah, I definitely do. One time we had an Auslan user who needed bright light so they could see their interpreter. And we had another person who needed darkness. They needed it to be like dark and dim and brought down because they had sensitivities to the lights. So my general advice is, if you can, I think it's always good to like come up with a couple of solutions. So what are a couple of things you know the space better, you don't want to put too much admin burden on a young person as well, but come up with some suggestions. Don't lock yourself into them, but come up with some suggestions. In this case, we said, what if we turn the lights down in the boardroom, but we've got a bunch of table lamps that we can bring in, so we can like target the table lamps to the Auslan interpreter, and you've got the quiet, peaceful space. And then I just spoke to each person and said, here's the suggestion. What do you think? In that case, they said, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds fine. I think the Auslan interpreters were like, yeah, just don't like shine it right in my face. And I was like, oh yeah, of course, yeah, that makes sense. I won't just blare it right in your face. So we tweaked it, but that is generally my method, is come up with a couple of suggestions, talk to each person individually and say, hey, there is someone else who needs bright light. Or the other person, there's someone who needs a darker light space. Here are some suggestions to compromise. How do you feel about that? Sometimes as well, you might have to do a compromise where it's not exactly perfect. That is totally fine, because it's also about both people being able to contribute. So just remember, the ultimate goal is they can both contribute equitably as much as possible. Sometimes a person might say, you know what, then I won't come in person. I'll go online. But if you've provided online, thumbs up, you've learned from the COVID era and you haven't just gone all back to in person or just online. So there's always ways around it. And the ultimate goal is, can you both contribute somehow? How can I get you to both contribute comfortably?
Awesome. Love that. Thank you. Folks, please feel free to put your hands up or put your questions in the chat or message Simon privately. On that, Simon, you just mentioned there about learning from COVID and making events hybrid and whatnot. Do you mind sort of sharing about how you're kind of handling that at the moment? Are you running all of your events as hybrid, or are you finding young people are wanting to mostly be back in the room? Any thoughts on that?
We think about it in terms of each piece of work, and like often the biggest one is time. Do we have enough time to do an in-person event? If we do it just online, it'll be just online. If we do in-person, it's always really hybrid. We never just do in-person anymore. That pretty much doesn't exist. It's now just in-person, and here's the link if you join hybrid. So we just always make sure that we're in a space that has a mic, camera, laptop, so that people can join. That's the bare minimum we would do. And then, so we go a little bit, I don't think, this is hard for everyone to do. I want to acknowledge this. At YDAS, if you're going to a hybrid event, we tell everyone who's in person to bring a laptop, because then they can see their faces in the Zoom as well. It's not just like a big, giant, wide view of a boardroom, which just isn't very accessible to a lot of people because they won't be like, who's talking? I can't tell who's in the back of the room. It's too small. Our boss, Mia, is an Auslan user, and one of her needs is to see everyone's faces. But I'm conscious that's not always possible. So I'd say the bare minimum is if you're doing an in-person event, have a camera, have a laptop so that people can join online and everyone can see them up on the screen.
Awesome. I love that. So one other question from me. I don't mean to be hogging it, folks. Please do pop your questions in the chat if you have them. What question from me was just around, maybe you've only got one disabled person in your activities and you're kind of nervous of making it seem like you're adjusting things just for them that could impact others, and you're sort of worried about, I don't know, identifying someone or shaming someone or looking like you're, giving preferential treatment or something in that area. Have you got any advice in that area, like how you might manage kind of communicating across the wider group about decisions to make significant changes?
We tend to communicate. It's the same way. I'm sure there are a lot of facilitators in these rooms. When you're doing a workshop and like someone does a transgression, someone does something they maybe shouldn't, you don't call them out there and then in the session and say, so Sam, what you said is wrong, and I'm going to correct you in front of everyone. You maybe like have a break. Oh, well, okay, have the break. You talk to them. You talk to Sam privately. You say, that's not the way to. That's not respectful. That's not how we want to talk. Here's how you want to do it in future. Okay, got that. And then maybe when you come back or the next workshop, you say, hey everyone, just a reminder of our respectful rules, and you remind everyone of whatever the rule was. Like we talk about each other with respect. So, you can't eliminate entirely that people will know, well, that's because that guy said that, but you're not doing it publicly, and you are reminding everyone, and you're demonstrating also that you are respecting everyone else, not just that person who's transgressed. So I think it's similar with disability. In advance, though, I think a lot of it is you have the conversation beforehand. That's a big one. Call the person, speak to them, and say, like, here's our plan, here's how we want to do it. Is that okay? They say yes. So now you're not doing anything wrong. You're not doing anything weird. For them, they know it's coming. And then when you set up the space, you just say, here's what we're doing. You don't need to say why. You just say, I think what we do is say, we're going to have the captions on it. It's a live caption because it's more accessible. That's an access need. We don't say who has it. We don't say why. We just do it that way. But I guess if it's a bit more obvious, like helping someone write something or they've got a support worker, I think it's just making sure the young person feels comfortable. Like, honestly, you have to suck up your own discomfort. It's not about you. It's about the person feeling comfortable. So if you do feel uncomfortable, talk to your colleagues about that and say, like, how do I get past this discomfort? But if they say they're comfortable with the solution, that's all you really need to worry about. And anything else is something you discuss with your colleagues and figure out.
I love that. Thank you. Great advice. There's a couple of things in the chat, but there's also Ruby with her hand up. Maybe I'll throw to her first.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you, Simon. That was really, really great and really insightful for me, as someone who is mainly a facilitator in online spaces, actually. And so I guess I was wondering about this because you're so right. Like in online spaces, I think it's fair to say that young people can really control their environment much better than coming to an in-person sort of situation. But I was actually wondering, right, because when we do like co-design work and sessions and stuff, we've often found that, yeah, it's a better kind of format to not just chat on Zoom, because it can also be just intimidating for literally anyone, but to allow for all different types of facilitation and participation. So we also use Miro boards, so people can go in there and just like type their thoughts and they don't have to speak on it, but at least it's somewhere and we can speak on that and draw that into the facilitation mode. I was actually wondering if you had any other tools or ways of working in online spaces that can also accommodate for all different types of participation that I might not have thought of yet. Like, yeah, I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, thanks, Ruby. I completely understand what you're talking about. I think one thing is like doing a bit like not every tool we use, not every workshop will be perfectly accessible. I think it's worth acknowledging that. And it is okay to tell people, like when you do an access key, you say, here are parts of this building that aren't accessible. And you just tell people that so they know going in. Like, that's okay. They then choose how they want to engage. I think with a workshop, you do as much as you can in advance, and there might still be things that aren't accessible, and you kind of have to respond. I think with Miro, for example, you can do a bit of a Google, a bit of a check. They'll have details on accessibility of Miro, and if they haven't done a good job, someone else will point out some of the shortfalls. So just be aware of the shortfalls of Miro and then counter them. To answer your question directly, Menti is another tool that we use to help, and I particularly like the just answer, like everyone can answer through an open text field, and it pops up as bubbles up on the screen. Because in particular, someone can be chatting on Zoom and you're getting 10 answers anyway, which you get then the answers. Awesome, you can take those and you've got those. But as a facilitator, you can then go, oh, this is interesting. Can we talk more? Who wrote this one? And then that gives them a chance to maybe speak a little bit more. But I've also seen people just use PowerPoints, particularly Google Slides. They open the slide up, they share the link, and they just put in a couple of like pre-formatted boxes and say, just type in your answers here. And I wasn't sure about that. I was like, is that too unclear? But I would just say young people seemed generally to just get that quite intuitively and used it quite quickly. So they just filled in different pages. And then the last thing is, what do you do to counter anyone who just can't use the tool? What have you got in place? And so we usually have, like, if anyone would like to, they can just private message us, or we can just have a separate chat, and I'll just type your answers in so that we've got them. But you don't have to type it into Miro. You don't have to use PowerPoint. You can still use your voice. You can use the chat. We're just going to bring it into one place. You might have someone like go into a private room, a breakout room, and say like, I'll give you some space now. What are your answers? You type them in as you go.
Thank you. Super validating. Thanks, Simon.
Yeah.
But Beth's got her hand up, and then I'm just keeping an eye on the time. We might take a little break from there before going into our breakout groups. So yeah, throw to you, Beth.
Thanks, Sam. I just had a really quick question, Simon. This is so helpful about disability pride and that concept that increasing access needs, like meeting access needs, is beneficial for everyone, not just the disabled person. And like whether you have an approach with that kind of framing in your work.
Like, how do we frame disability pride, do you mean?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Take for my question what you will.
Yeah. I think Together has a page on disability pride from memory. And we also have a tool called Map Your Future, which is like a little online course, sort of. It's like a little online tool, and that's more targeting. So Together's for you as youth workers to learn how we talk about disability pride. Map Your Future is how we talk about it with young people directly. What we usually do is just say, depends on who you're talking to, but one of the angles can be like, it's not your fault that you need access to the world. Like, we usually pair it with a social model just to help someone understand, say in our early leavers program, actually that's a good example because it's a sensitive space where school has not met their needs, let's put it that way. So they're feeling quite vulnerable. We'll talk to them and say, like, it's not your fault that the school didn't know how to work with you and your access needs. The fact that you have a disability is not your fault. It's not a bad thing. It just is that from the social model, the world didn't design itself to support you properly. And that's not your fault. So don't feel, we want you to not feel bad about having a disability or even having access needs. We want you to feel a sense of pride in who you are as a disabled person. Your disability pride is blah, 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 introduce the idea of disability pride. But more importantly, I think the first reaction often to a lot of people is, but I don't like my disability, or I don't like what my disability does to me in the world. And we say, and that's okay. Disability pride doesn't mean you love everything about your disability. Like I'm a disabled person too. I say, like, my cystic fibrosis and my diabetes, oh my God, I hate some of the stuff I have to do for my diabetes. It's so annoying. But disability pride is recognizing that you're part of a community. You're part of a community who have very shared experiences. I can talk to another disabled person. We can both go, oh my God, yeah, how annoying is constant glucose monitoring on your belly? How annoying is it that school just didn't understand my neurodivergence properly? It's a way to connect to each other and support each other as a community. So you don't have to love every part of your disability, but you can be more comfortable knowing that people share your experiences, understand you, and that through that community, you can feel more pride in the community and in what it means so that you don't feel shame. We introduce the idea that it's the opposite of shame. It's not being ashamed of it and being able to then talk about your disability, talk about your access needs, demand your access needs too, because shame can be something that stops you demanding things because you don't think you deserve it. But if you're proud of the fact that you're disabled, then you'll be more likely to say, no, I deserve these things. There's something for me. So that's usually how we frame it. And someone's put the map your future there. I love that. Thanks, Beck. Does that help, Beth?
Heaps. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. There are more questions in the chat, and I hate wrapping up conversations early, but we will run out of time for the next bits of the agenda. So what I reckon I'll do is wrap up the recording there. If you're following along on YouTube and you want to know more about joining these meetings, check out yakvic.org.au/YPPN.